friends. So today is a good day. Actually, it's a really great day because we're making sourdough chocolate chip cookies. And I've made this recipe already 2 other times and I'm so pumped about it. And so we're gonna get into it. It's very easy, just like a regular cookie recipe. You just throw a bunch of stuff in a bowl and beat it up, right? So there's a few methods to a few things, but we've got some butter in here. It's 7 tablespoons of butter or a substitute. And then it's a 1/4 cup of white sugar. Into that we'll add another 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar. And here's a little sneaky ingredient. It's a tablespoon of peanut butter. Now, if you don't like peanut butter, we can still be friends, but or if you have an allergy to peanuts, then try sun butter or another kind of nut butter. We'll just sloop it in there. Great. And we'll just add a teaspoon of vanilla. And I never measure this. I just squirt some in there and call it good. Now get you a mixer. Now if you don't have a mixer, you can certainly whisk this up by hand. But what we're going for is kind of a lighter texture. So it'll lighten up in color and it will be kind of fluffy. So bear with me. All right, so it's important that your butter is at room temperature, so not melted and also not cold from the fridge. So your mixture will look something like this, almost like cake icing. Now, it's time for our sourdough starter, which I pre-measured and it's already escaping its measuring cup. It's a 1/2 cup of starter. And I gotta say, I was a bit skeptical about putting sourdough starter in cookies, but I am a believer now. And I'm going to be experimenting with other types of cookies I can see. All right, now another whip around. Much shorter this time. All right, so now it's time for the flour. It's a cup of flour, and I'm just gonna cast it across the top. And now I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and then a 1/4 teaspoon, nope, that's wrong. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And again, I'll cast that on the top. You could be particular and whisk these together separately in another bowl if you wanted to, or not. And another mix. So it's important to not overmix here with the flour. So just until it all comes together, and then we will hand stir in our chocolate chips. Goodness. All right, so now we're just going to scrape off our beaters. Now, I'll tell you why I was hesitant about putting sourdough starter in a cookie. Well, because cookies and cakes and things of that nature, which are very light and fluffy in texture, they you don't usually want a whole lot of protein structure or gluten in that, because otherwise your things will be tough. But this dough goes through a little resting phase. It's 15 minutes in the fridge, or overnight if you wanted to wait that long, which I don't know why you would. But so that resting will allow the gluten that's in the sourdough starter to relax, and it's not going to be something that we'll notice later. So I'm just going to stir in the chocolate chips, or chunks in my case. Now this recipe makes about 18 cookies. Now if you want more than 18 cookies, it doubles very easily. So just put double the amount of everything in, and then you'll end up with more cookies, which in my opinion is never a bad thing. All right, so I'm gonna call that good. And what I'll do is I'm just going to let this rest in the fridge. And so it's gonna be in there for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how fast it takes me to get cleaned up in the kitchen. And then we'll start to scoop them. So see you in a minute. All right, so it's been about 20 minutes or so, and the dough has chilled a little bit. So the gluten strands that have formed in our mixing have relaxed, so that our cookies will be soft instead of kind of tough. And also that butter in there has firmed up a little bit, so it's good. Now, I've been scooping a little bit here. Now, my favorite cookie scoop of choice is a cookie scoop because I'm particular. Now, I will show you the way my grandma taught me so that you can see. Back in the oldie-timey days, before we didn't have cookie scoops, we had soup spoons. And so I'll just show you. You just take a soup spoon and you just kind of curl it up on the side, and so you get a healthy dollop, right? And then with the other spoon, you'll just, I like to transfer it to the other spoon, yeah? So that's kind of standing up now. And then plop it onto the spot. Now, it's not imperative that your cookies are round or whatever, but it is kind of important if you try to get them all about the same size, because then they'll cook evenly and you won't have like extra crispy ones versus extra soggy ones in the middle. So there you are. So you choose your method of scooping. But as I was scooping, I was just going to tell you a little backstory about cookies. Now, my experience with historic cooking ranges pretty much exclusively in the era of Prairie Town. And I know that cookies back then in 1836 and prior were pretty dear for a couple of reasons. Most of the time people didn't have cook stoves, which is kind of a precursor of what we have today. So it was, of course, fueled with wood, but it was a cast iron oven that you might have seen at Dr. Campbell's house. And so in that case, you could put your cookies on a sheet and then slide them in. But otherwise, people had to make their cookies either on a griddle, which, you know, then you have to flip them so they're cooked on both sides, or in a baking kettle, or you might call it a Dutch oven. And so it was kind of really annoying for a special treat. So most of the time people made a cake or a pie or something or other. Not that they didn't make fancy things back in oldie-timey days, but there just wasn't a lot of spare time for such things for most folks. Now I'm putting 12 cookies on this regular size sheet pan. And what I'll do before I shove them in the oven, I will just tamp them down a little bit. So what I mean by that is I'll just a little tap. Just like you would peanut butter cookies with a fork, you can do this with your fingers and just give them a slight smush so they're still about an inch tall. You could also be smart and wet your fingers before you do this, but you know, this means you get to lick your fingers when you're done. But so I'll finish this and then we'll get them in the oven. Now, the oven has been preheated to 350 degrees, and there are 2 racks in there. And so I'm going to set the timer. I'm going to put them in the oven, and I'll set the timer for 7 minutes. And then I'm going to take them out, and I'm going to switch the cookie sheets. And then I'll put them in for another 7 minutes. And then I'll pull them out, and I'll show you what I'm looking for to indicate their doneness. All right? So see you soon. Hey, so they're done. And they're real hot. I just pulled them out of the oven. So now, how do you know if they are finished? Now you might say to yourself or say to me, Sarah, those are not done. They don't look done, but they are, I promise you. Now here's a couple of things to look for. So when you look on the outside of the cookie, you'll notice it be just ever so slightly more browned. So I'll try to bring one up to the camera so you can see, but it's still quite tender. So the bottom is a nice light brown and the edges ever so lightly brown. Yeah. So now I'm just going to let them finish cooling on the baking sheet. This is kind of abnormal for cookie making, but this is how I do it, and they always turn out really well. Kind of crispy on the outside, nice and soft on the inside. So I'm going to wait and let these cool for a bit. Otherwise you end up with molten chocolate on your tongue and then you won't be able to taste anything for a while. But also you don't have to have parchment paper. If you don't have any parchment paper, just make sure you grease your baking sheets very well. Now if you wanted to save these cookies for a little longer, you could put them in a plastic bag and keep them in the freezer. But honestly, they're not going to be around for very long. They're just so good. I guess I'll just rip into one for you so that you can see the inside. Again, this is not cooled down. I literally just pulled them out of the oven. But for that camera magic, it's so good. You guys, it's so good. I really hope you try this recipe. And let us know if you do. Take pictures, post it on your socials, and tag us at CP at Home. And I hope to catch you for the next recipe. Take care.